What's going on, everybody? You are watching Vikings Now by Chat Sports. My name is Patrick Siepman, and coming up on today's show, we got a fun one because we're going to be talking about the Minnesota Vikings possibly reuniting with wide receiver Stefon Diggs. Yes, Stefon Diggs. We'll talk about him on the front half of today's show, and then on the back half, we'll dive into 5 sneaky free agent targets for the Minnesota Vikings. I think it's pretty clear the Vikings won't be big ticket spenders here in free agency, but a couple of guys on the margins that Minnesota could possibly sign. We'll talk about that coming up. But the big-time news, Jordan Schultz tweeting this out yesterday, is that the Patriots are releasing wide receiver Stefon Diggs. Now, Stefon Diggs was pretty damn good for New England last year. I was kind of shocked by this move. You know, if you go look at all the recent Patriots articles and they talk about possible cap casualties for New England leading up to this release, like he was listed, but I just thought with how important he was to their offense, to their locker room, he was viewed as a really good leader in New England. I was kind of shocked that they ended up releasing him. Now, when it comes to the Minnesota Vikings, with them expecting to lose Jalen Nailor during NFL free agency, he's probably going to sign around $10 to $12 million for 3 years. And with the Vikings being strapped for cash, it's going to be tough for Minnesota to retain Jalen Nailor. So they might be looking at that wide receiver 3 position. Do they trust Ty Felton to step up and be that wide receiver 3, or could they look at the veterans on the open market? And one of those could be Stefon Diggs. So Diggs over the last 4 seasons, pretty solid. Obviously in Buffalo back in 2022, he was absolutely phenomenal. I mean, Josh Allen's go-to guy, over 100 catches both of his last 2 seasons with the Bills, over 1,100 yards in 2023 and over 1,400 yards in 2022. Went to Houston, tore his ACL, but he was playing good football there. And this past season with New England, still went over 1,000 yards, had 4 touchdowns. Now, I will say his play fell off during the second half of the season, but as a wide receiver 3, Stefon Diggs could make some sense on a very cheap deal. Like, obviously, the whole notion of Diggs returning to Minnesota doesn't seem likely considering how it fell out, but like just on paper, a aging veteran wide receiver coming off a major injury 2 years ago who could possibly sign on a short-term 1-year, $5 to $10 million contract, that would make some sense for the Minnesota Vikings to bolster that wide receiver room with them possibly losing Jalen Nailor. So on paper, it makes a lot of sense. However, Diggs also has a lot of off-the-field drama, and we've known this throughout his entire NFL career. Diggs has a pretrial hearing on April 1st for a felony strangulation charge. Not going to dive into it too much. You guys can do your own research on that, but not looking good for Diggs. I think the Vikings, with everything that has gone with Jordan Addison, or gone on with Jordan Addison over the last couple of years, I think they just will be very much against bringing in another wide receiver with a lot of off-the-field drama, even though on paper, Diggs does make some sense. Now, how about this? Should Stefon Diggs retire a Minnesota Viking? Because I will say, I'm 26 years old. Growing up, watching this football team, one of the first players I really fell in love with was Stefon Diggs. I mean, he had a great career for the Minnesota Vikings, had the most famous play, in my opinion, in Minnesota Vikings history. So let's just say Diggs, he comes back, like maybe he signs somewhere else this upcoming season, but then he just wants to sign with the Vikings on a one-day deal. I would be fully in support of that. I think that'll be a pretty cool story. But Stefon Diggs, I just don't think it makes too much sense for the Minnesota Vikings. On paper it does, but with all the off-the-field stuff and the drama around his name, I'll probably be passing on Stefon. But you guys let me know. Would you bring back Stefon Diggs? Give me an S for sign. Give me a P for pass. I'm typing my P's for passes down below, but curious to see what you guys have to say if you guys would sign Stefon Diggs. Now, coming up, 5 free agent targets for your Minnesota Vikings, but let me tell you about today's presenting sponsor, and that is Factor Meals. Now, head to factormeals.com/VikingsChat50 off and plug in promo code VikingsChat50 off to get 50% off and free breakfast for 1 year. The cold days are here, and if you guys still have some big-time goals but no time to cook, well, Factor makes healthy eating easy with fully prepared meals designed by dietitians and crafted by chefs. So eat well without the planning or cooking. I love Factor because they have quality, functional ingredients, including lean proteins, colorful veggies, whole food ingredients, and healthy fats. They also have no refined sugars, no artificial sweeteners, and no refined seed oils as well. Now, they have over 100 rotating weekly meals to keep things fresh and delicious through winter. And these options include high protein, calorie smart, Mediterranean diet, GLP-1 support, and ready to eat salads. So head to factormeals.com/VikingChat50 off. Plug in promo code VikingsChat50 off to get 50% off and free breakfast for a year. Eat like a pro this month with Factor. New subscribers only. Varies by plan, but one free breakfast item per box for 1 year while your subscription is active. I think the most likely free agent the Vikings could sign this offseason is actually Steelers cornerback James Pierre. So the Vikings hired Gerald Alexander to be their defensive pass game coordinator to replace Durante Jones. He was coming from Pittsburgh Steelers where he was working with the secondary players. And James Pierre, a guy last season in pretty limited snaps, played in 14 games, was playing about 50% of those snaps. He was absolutely fantastic for Pittsburgh. His completions allowed, compared to attempts, 14 to 33, only allowed 142 yards, had 11 PBUs and 1 interception, had a quarterback rating allowed of 52.8. He is a guy where the Vikings get to get him on a cheap deal and get more talent to the cornerback room, because obviously we know in Brian Flores' defense, like, cornerbacks are not the biggest priority. Like safeties, edge rushers, linebackers, those are the main three positions that Flores needs to be successful in running the scheme. But just adding more talent, like a James Pierre next to Isaiah Rodgers, next to Byron Murphy, watch out for that margin signing for the Minnesota Vikings. And also, that's a signing I would be a massive fan of, where it's not like the needle mover of like bringing in a Jamel Dean, for example, but like this is a guy on the margins. This roster could get a lot better with a guy like James Pierre. Now, another guy, former Green Bay Packer, Quay Walker. Quay Walker, former first-round pick out of Georgia in the 2022 draft, where that 2022 linebacker draft was absolutely stacked. I mean, there was a ton of blue-chip players at the linebacker position in that draft. And Quay Walker, has he lived up to being that first-round selection? I would probably lean towards no, especially this last year. Did really struggle. Played in 14 games, had 128 tackles. But again, if you ask Packers fans, what do you think about Quay Walker? Was definitely a little disappointing. I think Edgerrin Cooper carries a lot of that load in that linebacker room. But if you could possibly get him on a 2-year, $18 million deal to be that linebacker next to Blake Cashman, and you're hoping that a guy like Brian Flores would be able to get the most out of his athletic ability, for a cheap signing, Quay Walker could make some sense. Now, the safety position will be addressed by the Vikings this offseason. I know they're big fans of Jay Ward. They're expecting him to take a huge leap in the year 4, but a guy like Reed Blankenship could make some sense. Now, Reed's played in a lot of big-time games throughout his NFL career. I mean, being with Philadelphia, being that man on the back end, like, he has truly been really impactful. Now, out of 107 qualified safeties, though, this past season, his PFF grades aren't too great. I mean, 46.5 overall, 32.7 in coverage. Run defense, 73.9, and even his missed tackle rate, not too good there. But in terms of his fit with the Vikings, like, if the Vikings don't want to spend, pick 18 on a safety, and they want to go, maybe, for example, let's just say they want to go, defensive tackle, and they go Caleb Banks at pick 18, or maybe they want to get another linebacker at pick 18, and they want to just try to get a margin move at the safety position, Reed Blankenship would be my guy. Now, how about Connor McGovern here? Now, listen, the Vikings are obviously going to have to address the center position at some point this offseason, whether that's in the draft or whether that's, in free agency. But Connor McGovern could make some sense. Out of all centers this past season, he had the 16th best PFF grade at 69.1. He also played in over 1,000 snaps, and he had 0 sacks allowed, which is obviously tied for the best. So he would offer some consistency at the center position for the Minnesota Vikings. He's also 28 years old, so this could be a guy that the Vikings bring in, and he adds some, longevity at the center position, which they need. Maybe he goes on a 3-4 year run being the center for the Minnesota Vikings. But watch out for him. It looks like he's done in Buffalo as well, so that's a pretty big-time pickup if the Vikings could get him. Now, how about another safety that could be on the margin? Andre Sisco. Andre Sisco, now, he was hurt with the New York Jets this past season, but he is known to being a ball hawk safety. He does have some versatility in his game. Didn't play at all for the New York Jets really last season after he got hurt. Only 8 games played, 41 tackles, had a TFL, but he could be another margin signing for the Vikings defense. We get him on maybe like a 1-year, $3-4 million deal, even if that. So I think that would be a big-time move for the Vikes. Any of those 5 guys, like, again, they're not going to be big for money spenders in free agency, but those 5 names could be decent ones to keep your eyes out on as we head into free agency next week. Now, if you guys could name a player you want the Vikings to sign. Also, as we're filming this, I'm pretty sure the Bears have just officially traded DJ Moore to the Buffalo Bills. So that's some NFC North news there. So we'll break that down later today. Appreciate all of you guys for tuning in. See you guys next time. Let's go Vikes.